Rachel, also to Julie and Mary Beth and everybody at the ASBDC for putting this session together. This is, at this point, we've done probably dozens of webinars together over the last several years. So I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with all of you and to an active chat, because this material really lends itself well to having you all introduce yourselves to each other, and I'll give you a structure to do that as we go along. But first, before we do anything, I'll just give you a little bit of background on who I am. I think that will add some context to this material. So I actually started out my career doing major international sport events, which means I worked Olympic Winter Games, Rugby World Cup. I worked with the US Olympic Committee. So these are some of the biggest brands and events in the world. And in the process of watching how they did what they did, I learned a lot about what marketing looks like on a big scale as you watch it unfold. One of the things that Olympic Games, for example, do very, very well is partnerships and really finding ways to leverage word of mouth, because the volume of people they need to engage in their project is huge long term. They can't do that alone. So I got to see that unfold on a big scale. And then when I started my own business about 12 years ago, I had to figure out, how do I take those great principles of marketing that I learned at an Olympic level and make them work for a business that looked like mine, or maybe yours, and that, didn't have anywhere near those resources. So for me, marketing is all about being practical and resourceful with what you have. And that's where this presentation comes from. To me, this is the smart stuff that you can do at any stage of your business to really move it forward. So that's the overall idea here. And a few quick housekeeping items. So first of all, even though everybody is on mute right now, I encourage you to minimize distractions on your end. The more you're able to apply yourself and apply this material to your business as we go along, the more you're going to get from it. So if the ringer is on your phone, or if you have, let's say, a messaging device on in the background, anything that you have open right now that you can shut down, this is a great time to do that. Also, there are a number of additional resources that, let's see, for those who are on with me live, I'm going to throw a link into the chat. It'll also be on the last slide for those who aren't on with me live. This link has almost all of the resources, the full slide deck, any additional resources or worksheets that I shared. The only thing it won't have is the recording, and that's something that Rachel is putting together right now for you. And so she'll be able to send all that out later. And in terms of questions, I usually save time for questions at the end, but I do encourage you to try to get questions in during it. If I'm able to notice that they're there in the chat, I will absolutely address them. So put your questions into the chat if you think to do that during the presentation. Also, I will be asking you some questions as we go along. And when I do that, the chat is the best place to put your responses. So you'll see that there's a lot of potential interaction that you can have with each other as well during this. The chat is going to be a good place to do that. So make sure, you might want to look at it now to make sure that your chat is set to everyone, so that when we start doing those questions during the session, people will be able to see your responses and not just me. So those are a few things to look out for now, but how are we going to go about this? I want to set this up for you. Make sure you feel like this is a good use of your time and that you're in the right place. First, we're going to start by just setting up with some small business realities. I think in order for any marketing advice to land, you really need to know who it's intended for. And I think it helps to have a section like this so that we're all getting a sense of what this presentation is meant to do, and maybe what it's not meant to do as well. And then we're going to get into some tactical advice. First, we're going to look at word of mouth marketing. I might use the word referral marketing there interchangeably. Then we're going to talk about finding business allies for your business, basically partnership marketing. And then lastly, we'll talk about, once you found those people, how do you collaborate with them, and some options for figuring out what the next steps are along the way. Okay, so that's what we'll be doing today. And if it sounds good to you, you are in the right place. Let's jump in and talk about profiting with partnership marketing. Okay, first things first, Let's talk about some just realities of being a small business owner or a small business marketer, some of the things that we're dealing with, especially from a micro business standpoint. So let's define that. I have a fun fact for you that I thought was very interesting when I first heard it. So according to the Small Business Administration, the Small Business Administration is abbreviated to SBA. Small businesses are defined as businesses with fewer than 500 employees. So 499 or fewer employees equals a small business. When I first heard that piece of information, I kind of laughed, because when I think about, let's say, a sole proprietor or a single owner LLC business, and then I think about a business that has 499 people working in it, those businesses look very different to me. They have different processes, different systems. They have different considerations day to day. And, when you think about what it means that they're all lumped into the same group by the SBA, consider, for example, grant guidelines or, COVID relief guidelines that you might have seen. It's why some very large seeming businesses were being able to access things that sometimes the really small businesses weren't even qualifying for. And so there's a huge amount of businesses. There's a huge range of businesses that falls into this definition. Now, I will say that depending on what industry you're looking at, they might define small business differently. So for example, the banking industry might look at this from a revenue standpoint, but this is an SBA definition. And for me, this is a bit too broad. As a marketer, I find that a lot of marketers are appealing to the larger small businesses and not necessarily to the ones that are on the fewer employee count end of the spectrum. So we need a way to talk about the lesser employee count type of businesses, and that would be the term micro businesses. Actually, about 90% of all US businesses are micro businesses, and this is also from the Small Business Administration. So that would basically be under 10 employees. Now here it says 1 to 9 employees, but actually you could have a business that's operating without anybody technically being an employee. So under 10 employees would put us in the micro business space. And I'm just curious, of the people who are listening in here live with me, go ahead and just put in the chat if you have a micro business, and I'll raise my hand for that as well. I have a micro business that I operate. But if you have one as well, I'm curious to see if those numbers will hold up for the group that we have here. Because ultimately, and we're already getting a yes here in the chat, so I'm just curious to see where we'll land with this. This does tend to be a high volume of the businesses that are operating and a high volume of the businesses that find the ASBTDC as well. And we're already getting a couple people who do feel like that category represents their business. So yes, an LLC, one person, exactly. I always find the definition of micro business even to be restrictive sometimes, because if you have a sole proprietorship, you might not even be an employee of your own business or a single owner LLC. So all of this to say that if this represents your business, a lot of marketers aren't actually speaking to this audience. They're speaking to businesses that might have more budget, might have more team members, more staff to be able to implement more complex marketing and advertising ideas. And so my goal is to provide advice that's going to be applicable immediately to this group, the micro business group. And the great news is that if you have a larger small business or mid-sized business or anything else, you can still use all of the ideas that we'll talk about today. You can do it faster, better, and stronger because you have more resources to do it. So this is something to be aware of here. And, because of that, just to acknowledge some of the challenges we face as micro business owners, which a few of us here do connect with that definition. First of all, a lot of us are dealing with a limited budget, and I often find that marketing advice is fairly flippant about how much money needs to be spent. And I understand that we don't all have any amount of budget for marketing. Sometimes people come to me and they say, well, I don't have budget for marketing, so that probably means I can't market, right? And I say, no, you have to market. If you want to have sales, people need to know about your business. So how are you going to do it in a way that fits your $0 budget or your however many dollars budget? So we need to find practical advice that's useful at any budget level the most important thing to know is that people do have to know about your business if they're going to buy your product or service, or tell other people about it so that they can buy your product or service. So this is something that's so important to get across. A lot of people come to me and say they want to wait on marketing until they have budget. And that's unfortunately just not viable if you want to have sales. Now, the second factor that a lot of us deal with is having a limited marketing knowledge. And I find for small businesses, a lot of times we start the business because we know the product or service really well, but then we have to learn on the fly all the things that happen around the business, all the working in the business things. So when it comes to that, people often start with things that feel more pressing. Maybe they feel like, I have some legal considerations to look at first, or I have to hire a team, or I have to work on getting my inventory up. So there's all these things that feel like more pressing concerns. So sometimes marketing ends up being put on a back burner, not only in terms of doing it, but in terms of understanding how you want to do it and getting the knowledge around it. And my hope is that we'll start bumping that up on the priority list as early as possible, because at the end of the day, people need time with your message before they're ready to buy something from you. And marketing is tied to sales. Again, it's tied to your revenue. So how would you pay for all those other things if you didn't have the revenue coming in? So these are all some things to consider. And the other factor as well is wearing too many hats. And I'm very aware that, when I give marketing advice, if you're not spending money, I'm recommending that you spend time. And I understand time is precious for a lot of people who run a small business. You may be doing many different functional tasks for your small business, and they take up a lot of time in your day. And so being efficient is critical. Even with all of the things that I'll share with you today, which are more about relationship building and spending time with relationship building, it is critical that you think efficiently about your resources, because while it may seem like, okay, but I'm going to spend a little more time to email people or connect with people, you can also be a lot more efficient with the connections that you're making, and hopefully turn more of those contacts into customers. And we just need to be efficient in our small businesses. There isn't a lot of room for waste. So those are a few factors that are top of mind for me when I think about marketing advice. And at the end of the day, there's a key premise for me that I want to make clear from the very beginning before we get into anything tactical. And that's that effective marketing involves relationship building. And not every marketer thinks this way. You can also have, let's say, a quantitative approach to marketing, where you say, for example, okay, if I do an advertisement that reaches 10,000 people, this is the percentage of people that is likely to take me up on my offer. And this is how many people need to take me up on my offer to make it worth it to do the advertising. You can do it from a numbers standpoint. And for the people who have that approach, it's all about the quantity. It's all about reaching the numbers that you need to get to the number of people who might accept your offer that you need. And that's all well and good, but there's a lot of waste in that, because if you keep reaching people in a one-off way each time, hoping maybe I'll get a few people who are low-hanging fruit to take me up on whatever I'm offering, you're not really creating a consistency of message, and you may not end up reaching some of those people enough times to actually get them to be interested in what you're doing. Whereas if you focus on the relationships at the core, and you think about, how am I going to take all the people that I met today and reach them again tomorrow and the next day and the next day, you're much more likely over time to get more of those people to take you up on your offer. They may not be low-hanging fruit the very first time you reach them, but they would be over time. So with that idea, that's what's at the core of everything that I share with you today. How can you focus on, how can I create a system for building up each of those individual relationships as efficiently and strongly as possible, so that I will see much more return in my business in some amount of time after that. Okay, so having said all of that, that's the philosophy that I'm hitting you with today. Let's go tactical. Let's talk about first word of mouth marketing. And this may seem like advice that you may be thinking, like, is this really marketing? And it very much is. And it's the thing that a lot of people choose not to do or skip over. especially when they're starting their business. So it's important that we start here to make sure that we're generating as much momentum as possible for our businesses. Now, I want to start with a question to you before I define word of mouth or referral marketing. On a scale of 1 to 10, if you're on with me live here, go ahead and put into the chat, how much work would you say you're doing now to generate word of mouth? Make sure that you have your chat set to everyone to see it. But on a scale of 1 to 10, how much work would you say you're doing now to generate word of mouth? 1 would be, I really don't think about it that much. 10 would be, I'm constantly thinking about how to connect with people and make sure they know my message and can become ambassadors of my message. So Angela's jumping in and saying 10. Awesome. Sounds like you're doing a whole lot of work on this level. I'm curious if we have anybody else on the spectrum here so we can get a sense. This is just sort of ranking ourselves. I know I haven't defined this yet, but let's just see as, a litmus test where we all think we are to start with. So I'm just jumping in with a 3. Okay, so we're getting everywhere from a 3 to a 10, 0 right now from Glenda. Possibly pre-launch situation there, and then planning to go to an 11 as soon as you get that loan approved. Awesome. So you're really, we've got a huge range here. Andrew's sort of just above the middle here at a 6. This is just our initial impressions of where we sit right now. This is helpful for me to see how we all feel like we're doing. And who knows, for those of you who are on the higher end of this, you may get some tips here that help you refine things a little bit more. For those who are on the lower end, you know that there's some work that you can do here. And this is a great time to be sitting on this presentation so you can get some ideas of how to structure this into your marketing strategy. So I really appreciate the responses there. Let's talk about what I meant by this question a little bit more, because I know I just threw that at you, but didn't really give you any definition. So first of all, let's just say you don't have to wait for word of mouth marketing to come to you. It does not have to be a passive process. And I think a lot of marketers think that it is. A lot of people come to me and say, Melissa, word of mouth, I've heard is the best kind of marketing. And it can be. But we'll talk a bit today about why we can't just rest on it. You really want to go out and generate it. If you want this to be a machine that's rolling for your business, if you want it to happen more often, that people say they heard about you and now they're coming to you, you have to do something to start making that happen more frequently. And when we think about that, consider that people are your brand ambassadors. All people can be your brand ambassadors, whether or not they've bought something from you yet. They can still be your ambassador. Everybody in your community can help share your story if they feel motivated to do that and if they remember you. So how can we make sure that they're motivated to do it, that they're remembering you, and that they're saying the right things to drive the right people to your business? At the end of the day, a connection is only as good as whether or not it's useful for your business, because otherwise people get connected to your business and realize, I don't need this, and that helps nobody. So we want to make sure that all of those things are ultimately being fulfilled. And with that in mind, there are 3 keys to successfully building word of mouth that we'll talk about today. And again, this part of the presentation is going to seem like the most fundamental part, but it's critical to do these things to make sure that you are creating efficiency in your business and momentum in your business. So the first one is something that I call controlling the message. And before we get into what this actually looks like, I'll just give you an example of why this is important. So I told you up front that earlier in my career, I worked major international sport events. So in that world, I used to have these very long, fancy job titles, just jumbles of words that didn't necessarily mean a lot on their own. And as an example of one of them, when I worked in Vancouver for the Olympic Games there, I was the deputy manager of venue press operations, the Vancouver Organizing Committee for the Olympic Winter Games. That was the title. That went on my business cards. That was in my email signature. That was all the information somebody needed to know. And if I was talking to somebody from that world, hearing my job title was every piece of information they needed to know if they had anything to talk to me about, what we could potentially meet about and discuss, what kind of business we could do. Those words were important. They meant something within that world. But outside of that world, it was just a bunch of words. And I noticed that when I would go visit friends or family, if they ever introduced me to somebody, it would go like this. They'd say, oh, here's Melissa. She's the, and they would fill in the blank with a lie, with something that was not true. Every single time, it was a false statement about what I did for a living. Sometimes it was close, but a little off. And sometimes it was wildly off. And because I was standing next to them in those moments, they would be looking at me, looking for validation, looking for me to jump in. And I would do that if I saw that they needed that. But every time there was some sort of a mistruth that was put out there. Sometimes it was really big. For example, a lot of people who know me personally know that I used to be a gymnast for a long time. I was a gymnast for 18 years. So people would introduce me as an Olympic gymnast, but I never was. I worked the Olympics, but I wasn't an Olympian. Those are very, very different things. And for the people who were interested to hear about my Olympic gymnast career, I had no stories to tell them. So the conversation became awkward very quickly because I had to correct misinformation. If somebody wasn't interested in the thing they heard, you have to wonder, would they be if they heard the right thing? And this is those moments when I'm there to hear the introduction and where I can course correct it on the spot. The trick is we are not always available to hear every introduction being made about our businesses. And how can we make sure that as many of those introductions as possible are accurate? They are actually what you do and actually what your business sells. This is more important than you think it is. I'm telling you, try getting people to talk about what your business is and see how close they get to the truth. And you'll start to see how important it is to make sure you are heading this off at the pass and getting in front of it and making sure that you're putting the right information out there. And how do we do that? So all of this sounds like a good idea, but how do we actually get this done? First of all, you have to know what message needs to go out. And for this, I'd like to present a format called the controlled message. Look, you might have heard of things like elevator pitches or brand statements or wow statements. There are a lot of statements out there, and often they're lengthy, right? You do an elevator pitch, you're going to be spending some time talking to somebody about your business. But there is a reality here that people have very limited space in their memories for something that's new to them. So how can you make sure you're condensing this information as much as possible? How can you give them just a handful of keywords that they have to remember to describe your business? So as an example, for my business, if somebody said, Melissa, what do you do? I would say, I help small businesses market on a budget. And I'm going to keep it right there. I help small businesses market on a budget. I help small businesses market on a budget. If I repeat that a few times in a conversation, my hope is it's going to start to become a pattern in the other person's brain. So if you only have a sentence to get the information out, well, you're prepared with the statement that you want to make. I help small businesses market on a budget. If you've got half an hour, if you've got half a day, if you've got a weekend, if you've got, every Wednesday night with somebody, can you keep peppering in that statement? Even if you start giving them more context, more stories, more information, can you keep peppering in that controlled message so that the pattern takes hold in their brain, so that when somebody says, do you know somebody who helps small businesses market on a budget? They know, oh yeah, I do know somebody who does that, and they can remember it word for word. The controlled message is a key place to start. And again, I know that formats such as elevator pitches exist. They exist for a reason. You want to be able to get a whole bunch of information out about your business. But if this is about getting somebody to remember your message, we have to lean into the fact that people have very short-term memories, and we want to somehow get in there. And so the more you can condense the information and know upfront what that needs to be, the better off everybody is going to be in the long run. Now, in practical application, if I'm in a conversation with somebody, they might say, Melissa, what do you do? I might give them my controlled message. And if they look uninterested, we move on. If they look interested, I might follow up with questions. I might say, oh, do you have a small business? Or do you know somebody who has a small business? A lot of times they offer that information right away. And then I'll just keep asking questions until we figure out, well, why are you interested in this controlled message? What can I tell you about that's relevant to you? You'll notice that if you do this, because at the end of the day, there are quite a lot of ways that I can help small businesses market on a budget, but that's not important in that first moment. What's important is to find out, does this matter to you at all? If I say I help small businesses market on a budget, do you need to know more? Do you want to know more? And then we can start dialing into the specifics about it, if need be, and if you so choose. But if not, we walk away from it, right? So this is the strategy that I would take, especially in a conversation, in a give and take atmosphere, because you can get to the heart of the matter a lot more effectively just by starting simple and building with questions. Now, this is an exercise that I would hope you would do after this session if you haven't already had an opportunity to do something like this for your business, where you just sit down, you write your business name, and then you think, what is the one sentence that I can give somebody that's really going to be effective here? We're going to look at a maximum of 4 to 7 keywords, but bonus points the shorter you can make it, and bonus points if you can add the name of your target market in there. If you find that you have multiple different target markets that you provide different types of products or services for, you might consider splitting this out, where you have a different specific controlled message for each one, but also one that's overarching. So if you're talking with somebody about your business in general, you have one, but if you're talking with somebody from a specific target market, you can pull the one that's specific to them, because that's the only one they need or want to hear about. So these are some things to consider as you build a controlled message for your own business. And I encourage you, as I'm talking, because I'm sort of filibustering with this, give some thought to what yours is. And I'm going to give you an opportunity a little bit later on to share your own in the chat, so that everybody can see it, so you can connect with each other more effectively and see if there are any possible partners for you here. But for now, just take a moment and think about it. If you have one right off the top of your head, that is great news. And now the question is, can you share that with others? If it's at all hard for you to come up with, imagine how difficult it is for other people to say the right thing about your business if you're not even sure what you want to be said about your business. So remember that controlled message. Keep it simple, keep it short. If you can mention your target market, great. And one other tip that I'll put out there, let's say, let's not make it a list. So for example, let's say you're a landscaper and you say grass, trees, hedges, shrubs. Nobody's going to be able to remember your list. It doesn't really latch onto the brain very well. So what would you say instead to help somebody understand the overall gist of the services that you can provide? So this is a really important first step to make sure you know what message needs to go around. But what step happens after that? Because I've spent a lot of time on that first key, but what do you do after that first one is done? The second one, and this is going to sound so silly for me to say, but actually do something about that information. Be the catalyst for it. Be proactive in sharing your message with everybody you know. And I know that there are going to be some reservations to that, but let's just look at what that actually looks like. The first step I would do is identify all of my contacts. And by the way, we are at a great time of year to be doing this. As we start getting closer to the holidays, this is an excellent time to do outreach to everybody that you know. So take special notice of this action step here, because this is an excellent time to do it. Identify all of your contacts. I find the easiest way to do that to start just by thinking about where and when I knew people from. So you might think, oh, are there people I went to high school with? Are there people who I see when I pick up my kids from school? Are there, service providers that I work with? Are there, do I go bowling on Thursday nights and there are people that I see there? Where do you know people from? Start by thinking about it that way and just begin making a list of all the people. Then the second thing I would do with that list is reclassify those people, because it's probably going to be easier for you to reach out to people based on how well you know them versus where you know them from. So this next step would be, who are the people you know really, really well that you want to give so much information to? Who are the people who are acquaintances of yours, who you see sometimes, but they'd be interested or supportive of at least hearing your statement, your controlled message? Who are the people who are more distant? You don't see them as often and you want to make sure that you get in front of them. Are there people you don't want to contact? That's fine. You don't need to contact them. You don't need to create awkwardness or, continue bad relationships if you have those. But you can start sorting those things out, and then you can do the outreach. And with the people that are the closest contacts to you, you can make sure, they're probably going to be very interested to advocate for you if the opportunity arises. So can you make sure that they have the information that they need to do that? For the people who are perhaps at the acquaintance level, this is where I find things get a little sticky. This is where resistance tends to come in from business owners that I talk to, where they'll say, I don't really want to mix business and personal. They'll get very particular about that. But the truth here is that you don't have to hard pitch these people. All you have to do is tell them what you do for a living, something you're very passionate about that you spend a lot of time doing. You're basically just updating them on your life. So if somebody says, Melissa, what do you do all day? And I say, I help small businesses market on a budget, I'm selling nothing. If we start a conversation because they have an interest in some aspect of that, that's great. We can figure out what that looks like. But for the moment, it's just informing them what I do all day. And it's actually building the connection between us. I also want to know what they do all day. So it's an opportunity to have that exchange. So if you think about how you would apply this, let's say at this time of year, let's say you're looking at how am I going to do outreach during the holidays? Tell people a few updates about what you're doing, include in that your controlled message, and then ask them, I'd love to hear what you've been up to. I'd love to hear what you're doing. And it becomes more of a conversation and an opportunity to create an exchange with them. And in that process, chances are you are going to find some people who have a reason to be connected to your business. So if you are brand new in marketing your business, if you're launching something new, or if you're just not sure that the people in your world know what you do, this is a good exercise to do. And this is something that I look at every single year, especially around the holidays, to sort of tweak my list of, am I still connected with people who came into my life this year or who reconnected with me this year? Am I really making sure people know what I'm up to? So this is something that you can do. And within that, there are a few smaller details to consider. So if there is somebody who expresses any sort of an interest in what's happening in your business, how can you then educate those people to make sure they're more informed as potential customers, clients, or just referral sources? Can you give them your controlled message? Can you give them a link to your website? Would they hand out business cards for you? We'll make sure that they have some of those. Are they good storytellers? Can you give them some stories about what's happening in your business? Or can you give them an experience with your business? So make sure people are really primed to be able to talk about your business effectively. And when they do, have a follow-up plan if they actually make a referral. And, this may have happened to you before, but have you ever had this thing happen where you get an email from somebody you haven't thought about in a bit and they say, oh, this person should meet this person meet this person. I was just thinking about you two. You'd be great contacts for each other. You go ahead and take it from here. So you get a kind of out of the blue introduction to somebody you don't know. How often does that lead to absolutely nothing? Because maybe somebody sends an initial follow-up and then it often kind of just dies off from there. How can you make sure that those moments are honored? It's better for everybody, including the referrer, if something actually comes of those conversations, because then it's not awkward, it's not weird, and you can go somewhere with those moments. But it only happens if you have a plan for how you're going to do that. So what does that look like for you? You can start to formalize that plan and then just activate it when those moments occur. So for example, maybe you get an introduction and you follow up immediately, but you don't hear back right away. Maybe you have a plan to follow up again the next week. Oh, I'd really love to connect with you for coffee. Any friend of this person's is a friend of mine. How do you, create the plan that you'll be able to just put into activation mode later? And when those things happen, can you connect back with your referrer? And this is actually a really important one. Validate them. Let them know, oh, that was a perfect type of contact. Thank you so much. If it wasn't, be like, Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm always looking for, and you can then insert what you're actually looking for there so that you're helping to steer them in the right direction for next time. But I'm telling you, if you acknowledge the referral that was made, a lot of times you'll either get a referral right on the back of that, or they'll think of you again later. So depending on what your business is or how much money comes in from a sale, it might be that you want to go as big as actually doing a gift for people who make referrals, or it could just be a verbal thank you or anything in between. But having that moment of acknowledgement will help keep the momentum going for those referral sources. So those are some initial thoughts about, how to get the conversation started. Now, one of the things that people often come to me with as a stumbling block is, I'm just not sure what to say, or, I don't want to toot my own horn. I want to be humble in my business. And a lot of business owners think that being humble is completely at odds with marketing, but it doesn't have to be. It's all about how you talk about your business. So, there could be ways to create conversation around your business. This could be things you put in holiday cards, in social media posts, in emails to friends. You can say things like, I'm so excited to announce, and you can share an achievement. It's an honor to tell you that. You can also put this on your community. Thank you to everybody who's been part of this journey with me so far. You can acknowledge and give shout outs to people who were part of some achievement that's happened in your business, or, the fact that your business exists. So you can put that out there, and you can even give credit to other people as much as you want to. You can also ask the person you're talking to give you an update on what's happening in their life. And that makes it more conversational. There are a lot of ways to make this so it doesn't feel like a hard pitch. The important thing is getting the information out there so that the conversation can start, and you can make sure the people in your world know what you're doing. Now, having said all of that, what I really want to get into here is the conversation around partnership marketing, because once you've gotten to a place where the people in the already circle that you've built, the circle that exists already, once those people know, how do you start building it? How do you start now going out into the world, looking for people who would be good allies for you? And that's often going to be other business owners who are reaching your target market, but we'll look at some different types of categories for that as well. This whole section, actually the next two sections, are all about partnership marketing. And this is where I think it gets really fun. Partnership marketing is the kind of marketing that I encourage pretty much every type of business to do. And there aren't a lot of types of marketing that I do that with, but pretty much every kind of business can find some other business out there that they can be in a mutually beneficial alliance with. So partnership marketing, to be clear, it's not about getting into a legal arrangement, signing on the dotted line, creating a joint venture. It's not any of those things. It's more informal than that. It's locking eyes with another business and saying, I think we can both help each other reach our audiences. Collaborating with other businesses or influencers for mutual benefit. It doesn't have to be the exact same benefit that you're doing for each other, but you both have to help each other in some way to achieve your goals. And you can think about this as well as, leveraging your relationship with other businesses to access each other's communities. That's what partnership marketing would look like. There could be other kinds of partnering that have nothing to do with marketing. But if we're thinking about this from the standpoint of let's boost each other's voices, there's a lot of options for how we get there. The first question is, what businesses are you looking for? And this is where I really want you to start thinking very actively as I'm talking about what businesses might fall into these categories for you. So we're going to go through 4 categories of types of partners. The first one, I would say, is probably the more common one: compatible businesses or influencers. Now, compatibility can be measured a couple ways. It could be measured in terms of your offerings. Like if I make shoes and you make shoelaces, there's probably a lot of ways we can work together. But compatibility can also be in terms of target market. Like if I'm reaching mothers of 2-year-olds and you're reaching mothers of 2-year-olds, we can help each other reach mothers of 2-year-olds. There's a great fit here between our businesses, especially if we have different products or services, because then we're not in competition with each other, but we're both trying to reach the same audience, and we can help each other do that. So this would be an angle that you can look at. Now, an extension of this, but I'd like to put a finer point on it, is businesses that have different structures, but may still have an aligned target market with you. So when I say this, I'm thinking, for example, of, let's say there's a nonprofit out there that has a fundraiser coming up and they know they want to get some community sponsorships for that event. So they'll go out to corporations and to local small businesses and they'll say, we would love you to sponsor this event to the tune of $1,000. And a lot of those corporations and small businesses are getting a lot of requests like this. They may or may not have budgeted for it. A lot of times that nonprofit will get a no as a first answer. And, the company will say, oh, it looks like you're really doing great things, but, there's only so many funds to go around. We do so much work in the community already. Sorry, we can't support you with this. A lot of times at that moment, the nonprofit walks away from the conversation. But my question is, why do you need to walk away? Because if this truly is a potential partnership where you have aligned target markets, there are a lot of other ways you can support each other. So for example, if the nonprofit went back to the small business or the corporation and said, I totally understand you really are doing great work in the community and we appreciate that. And we also think that there's, potential ways to help each other anyway. What about if we did a feature on you in our next newsletter and you did the same thing for us? Now you're taking the conversation away from the financial burden and you're putting it more towards partnership marketing. And if you start to get some yeses for that, can you take those relationships and keep building them each year? Who knows, maybe it becomes something that is a sponsorship in a future year, but it's still beneficial to both businesses, even in its current form of sharing features and newsletters. So I know that's a specific example around nonprofits, but I encourage you to think about if and how that applies to your business, because a lot of times the conversation about mutual benefit goes out the window when we look at a business of a different size, but it really shouldn't. So how can we make sure that we're talking to every type of structural entity of business in a way that still talks about like what is good for you and me? How can we have mutual benefit here? Now, a third example is hyperlocal companies or influencers. And look, sometimes these have a common target market and sometimes they don't. But just because they're in your area, there may be an interest in having local connections that they can refer. And with this, I'll give you a very strange specific example that happened to me or to another business in connection with me. So for a long time, I lived in Seattle and I used to volunteer a couple times a month to do box office tickets for a local comedy theater. And one Saturday, I believe it was a 4th of July weekend, out of the blue, just in the door, up the stairs walk Mila Kunis and Ashton Kutcher. And I'm sitting in the box office thinking, okay, well, first things first, I have to get these people to buy tickets and go into the theater, which did happen. And they loved the show. Mila laughed till she cried. They took photos with the cast after, and it became like this mini viral sensation in that city for a short time, something that they really did as much as they could to capture that lightning in a bottle for themselves. Great story, but it almost didn't happen. So I found out later in a very roundabout way that before they got to the theater, they had actually been 3 doors down at the local ice cream shop. And they asked the person scooping their ice cream, what can we do in this town on a Saturday night? And that person suggested that they go one town over and they check out, there was a lox and a salmon hatchery. It was, almost 10 o'clock at night. There was a live comedy show 3 doors down. And that person did not think to recommend it. So the only reason that Mila and Ashton actually made it to the theater in time for me to sell tickets before we were closed for the night is that when they walked out of the ice cream shop, they walked to the right instead of to the left. They happened to see the sandwich board and they came into the theater. That required a lot of luck. And you better believe that since that time, that theater owner has offered tickets to local shops so that the employees knew about their show. They've hosted Chamber of Commerce meetings. They want to make sure people know that they exist in the community. And look, this doesn't have to only apply to businesses with a brick and mortar or businesses with a physical location. If you have an online business, but it's, you are located in a certain city or in a certain zip code or in a certain area, make sure the businesses around you know that, because this could be a reason why they refer your business over a competitor business. Could be a reason why they refer your business at all. Maybe they would have had no idea of any business in that category to refer. So these are the kinds of conversations you can start with to make sure that the people who want to make local connections can do that for you. One more though, and I know I just mentioned this word, but I don't want to discount the idea that competitors could be good partners for you. Competitors can potentially be a great source of information, of overflow business. If you have a business category that has a lot of competitors in it, maybe you partner up with one or two to sort of form an alliance within that market. Something that I really saw, for example, during COVID was that a lot of competitor businesses were reaching across the aisle to have strategic conversations around how to help ensure that their industry survived. And those relationships, I think many people found that they were very useful and very supportive. So the question is, how can we continue that? If you have bad blood with a competitor, I'm not suggesting getting into a sticky situation with that, but there could be value with competitors. So those are all some things to think about. Now, I put this all onto one slide for you to use as a quick reference, because anytime you're in a situation where you are around other business owners, there is potential for you to shop for potential partners. Any networking meeting, even here today, there is an opportunity for you to have conversations with other business owners and see if there's a potential pairing. And we'll talk in a bit about what you can do with those people. That'll be the next and last thing that we cover. But my question for you is, where and when is your next opportunity to look for partners? If you think it's here, I want you to give you a chance to put your controlled message into the chat. Introduce yourself in the chat. And again, make sure that your chat is set to everyone, because if you send it to the hosts and panelists, nobody else will be able to see what you do, and you won't be able to have these conversations. So if you do want to put your controlled message and your business name into the chat for other people, use this as an opportunity to practice seeing if any of the people who are on here live are actually potential partners for your business. It looks like, a lot of people are only seeing hosts and panelists as well. So let's see if there's a way to change that in the back end. That would be awesome. If anybody does want to put their controlled message, I'll also read it aloud if you want that. So that's just something to consider there. But remember, every opportunity that you're getting in front of business owners is an opportunity to literally shop for partnerships. And then so it looks like that should be fixed. So hopefully you all have an opportunity to go in there now. I really encourage people to chat with each other while I'm giving you the next steps. It would be a great success to me if we found a potential partnership right here today. So the last piece that I want to talk about is, how do you collaborate? Once you've found those partnerships, that's step one, knowing who would be the right fit. The next step is proposing your common business interests, and they're not always the same thing. So for example, I might say to you, I want to reach as many people as possible and get brand awareness out there for my business. And you might say, that's great. I have one specific person that I'm trying to connect with, and I know you know them. Can you introduce me? Those aren't the same goal, but we can both help each other with them, right? So if you've decided that you can help each other, now you get to the next step. Defining what kind of support would actually make an impact. And this is where you have a lot of tactical options. So if we put this categorically, broadly, we can look at 3 different areas: informing each other, promoting each other, and collaborating with each other. Informing each other could just be, look, we're both in different rooms, hearing different things. We may find opportunities and bring them back to each other. Or we could share current events, things that are going to be happening locally or in our industries, to make sure we have enough information to be able to pivot accordingly. So that's another angle as well. Mastermind groups are probably the most formal version of this, something that's more structured, that's more consistent. Promotion. Promotion can be a lot of things. It can be as complicated as a co-branded event. We could say we're both going to put equal legwork in and share this with our audiences. And, there's going to be a lot of logistic component with this, but potentially a lot of reward as well. It could be as simple as saying, we'll just advocate for each other. If somebody ever says, do you know somebody who does this? I'm going to raise my hand and say, I sure do, and make that connection to your business. There's also a whole slew of things under cross marketing and cross advertising. And one of the resources that I shared in that landing page link that I put up earlier, and I'll also have it up on the last slide, is just a laundry list, a word cloud of all different kinds of ways to cross market and cross advertise. So if you find somebody that you think could be a good partner, use that document to help you brainstorm. The last one would be something like collaboration. And this could be anything from like maybe having a joint offer or having it be something like, I know everybody who buys this from me is going to need this from you. So how can we make sure that part of the workflow is me making a referral to you or you making a referral to me? How can you make sure that those things are connected in the consumer's mind? It could be that you just share an expense and you can support each other in some way with that. That could even be, for example, something like, oh, we're going to share a booth at a local farmer's market so that we're absorbing the cost together. These are some options that you have. And then, client education is another one. Maybe you just say, there's going to be a day when I get access to talk to your clients and you do the same thing with me. And it's a value add for the people who need that information. It shows the strength of your community, and it potentially gives you both access to a new pool of possible customers or clients. So these are just some examples of some things that you can do together. But again, you'll want to check that more specific promotional tools worksheet to get like even more specific ideas than this. At the end of the day, most types of marketing can involve collaboration. So partnership marketing is just, how can I take any type of marketing that I do and talk about another business with it and have them do the same thing for me? So it changes the way you start looking at your marketing when you look at it as an opportunity to build alliances. At the end of the day, I just want you to help your community help you, because this is where those ambassadors come from. This is where the momentum comes from. And this is where every relationship gets stronger so that you're maximizing your time and your resources. I do want to make sure we save enough time for questions, because I know I've talked at you a whole lot here. So you probably have specific things in mind for your own business, and I'm happy to address those today. Here are some reminders of what we talked about in case it helps jog ideas for questions you want to ask. So we talked about some of those small business realities. Then we got tactical. First, we looked at word of mouth marketing and referral marketing for the people you already know. Then we looked at partnership marketing, finding business allies for your business. And when you've done that, some things to consider as you consider how to collaborate with them. As you get your questions in, here's I don't know if it's a reminder or just new information that we have a few more presentations coming up in this series. Specific dates are TBD, but I wanted to put this on your radar. January 2024, we're going to talk about building a smart online marketing strategy. We're going to look at blogs and newsletters and lead magnets and social media and websites. Then March 2024, we're going to talk about smart principles of marketing messaging. That one's more about looking at your brand. And then in May 2024, we're going to talk about creating a profitable marketing strategy, building it from beginning to end. How do you go about doing that and making sure you have as much efficiency as possible? And I'm putting up this last slide here. Again, I'm happy to address any questions. That landing page link, again, is at the bottom, but I also included that top link there because it would be great if Rachel could potentially talk about how you can connect with the ASB TDC if you want to get direct one-on-one counseling to help you address any of these questions in more detail. But that website link is there as well. So I'll ask Rachel to come back on and talk about that.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for a great presentation, Melissa. Feel free to send any additional questions in the chat. We can always address those. but the Arkansas Small Business and Technology Development Center offers free consulting to small business owners in Arkansas. So that can range from financial consulting to marketing services, starting a small business. We're really a resource here. We have multiple consultants who are happy to meet with you. So if you're not already a client and would like to learn more about our services, you can go to the links that I put here, sbtdc.uark.edu. And then that second link will be a direct sign up link for a consultation.
Perfect. Yeah, and if anybody did want to take a moment here, I know that we're, again, this is still being recorded. So if there is anything that you want to address, feel free to do that. Or if Rachel feels comfortable to turn off the recording for questions, that's an option as well. But we have a few minutes to address anything specific to your business if you want to talk through ideas or examples. So that's an option. Awesome.
And if we don't have any questions, we can go ahead and close out.
Awesome. I'm so glad everybody took the time to join in for this today. Just to spend time thinking about how you want to market your business is huge. And this really, there's a reason why we chose this topic for this time of year, because this is the time when the end of the year rolls around and people are thinking about holiday outreach. This is a great time to start reaching out to the people who you already know. And it's a great time to think about how in the new year, you're going to reach out to people you don't know yet. So this is when I would do it. And this is when I hope you'll look at that as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Melissa. And thank you so much for everyone who attended today. You will receive a recording of this webinar and the deck as well. So thank you, everyone.
Bye.